I think that when you think about capitalism and inclusion, if you're queer, it's very important to have rights. But if we are in a society that requires us to work, then we have to be able to work without any limitation and just provide to ourselves, to our families, to our communities. And this is something that is still, work in progress.
Welcome to episode 64 of People Are the Answer. I truly believe that people are the only answer to the world's many problems. I'm Jeffrey M. Zucker, a serial entrepreneur, here to learn how innovators are creating outsized, transformational social impact. Today's episode features Renée Rosillo, a serial entrepreneur who is bringing much-needed support to underserved Latinx and diverse founders in the U.S. and Latin America. In addition to her work in entrepreneurial inclusivity, Renée also has experience working at the UN, developing software and robotics, and improving sustainability in food manufacturing, and much more. Renée was truly a fascinating interview, detailing her courageous journey to becoming an entrepreneur, trans activist, and harvester of accessibility and inclusion. Renée and I discuss her growing up in Mexico City, venture capital, AI, Web3, the importance of propping up underserved founders, and much more. Here is Renée Rosillo on People Are the Answer. Renée, thanks so much for joining me on People Are the Answer.
Thank you, Jeff, for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to our conversation. It'd be great if you could start out by telling us who you are, where you're based, and what your current role is.
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Renee. I'm a trans woman. I'm a community builder and a founder. I'm based out of San Francisco, California. I'm originally from Mexico, and I'm working on my new company. It's called PRISM. And what we do is we create safe spaces for queer founders.
And what would you say motivates you generally in life?
Well, I'm a founder, and I've been working on startups for the past 10 years. So I feel that my biggest motivation is to create something that brings value to the world. And now that I'm working on something that is deeply aligned to who I am as a person and to my identity, what gets me out of bed is just knowing that I have to bring change to the world. And if I don't do it, then there's going to be a lot of founders and folks that are not going to have the same opportunities. So I'm driven to create change.
Yeah, that's beautiful. I appreciate you sharing. And you mentioned being from Mexico originally. Is that where you grew up?
I grew up in Mexico City. Yeah, that's hometown.
And what was it like growing up there?
Mexico. Mexico City is a global city. If you haven't been recently, you should go. It's a wonderful long weekend destination, and it's just bustling with life, with activity. You feel the energy. I feel that my time during growing up was very prototypical of anyone like growing up in Latin America. And I feel that what was different for me is that, I'm a trans woman, so I'm transgender, and I grew up as a boy. That was the biggest change in my life to uh, what I now can see as what my ideal life could have been. But it was pretty good. I love it.
Well, I'm sure that was not an easy experience to go through. If you're open to talking more about it, I'm sure there's listeners that aren't that familiar with what that entails, and anything that you're willing to share.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Well, so all my life I suffer from something that is called gender dysphoria. I feel like the easiest way to explain it to someone that is not feeling it is just like if you were wearing the wrong pair of shoes, like wearing the left one on your right foot, and feeling that something is not good, is disconnected. And of course, there's levels. There's folks that experiment gender dysphoria very intensively, very intense. In my case, it wasn't as profound as to other folks leave it, experimented. But 4 years ago, I realized that I had gender dysphoria. And then when I connected the dots back into my childhood and then on my teenage years and everything, I realized that I've been suffering from it. Um, this happens to a lot of trans folks. In my case, I since puberty hit, I had this dream like this daydreaming of I wish that tomorrow I'm gonna be a girl, you know. But that was it. It wasn't more profound, and I think that sometime I expressed this to a friend, and he said something like, "Hey, don't be saying that," or something, and I just, thought that it was something normal. And in my case, I didn't meet another trans woman until very late in my life. That's also what I'm doing, because you need to bring visibility into the equation. So I hope that by being more visible, people will have an easier time growing up and just being their truest selves.
Thank you for your willingness to share and for putting yourself out there in the name of creating equality and acceptance. It's really been just disgusting to see so much of the hate in our society these days, especially towards the trans community. And I appreciate your efforts in trying to change that.
Yeah, and thanks for mentioning it. I feel like we are living in an unprecedented time. This is something very similar to the new fight for rights. This is something that every folk that is gender nonconforming or that identifies as LGBTQIA plus or it's an ally should be very loud about, because it's difficult. In my own story and with all the privilege that I have, sometimes being a trans woman, it feels like I don't have privilege, but then I look into my life and I realize I have it. I wake up every day in a safe space. I have a warm bed. I have food to eat. I have a wonderful job where I speak all day with founders. I talk to investors. I am having like this energy from folks that are changing the world, right? And that's amazing. That's an opportunity that has been my dream all my life. And then I see that other folks don't have as many opportunities. Um, but I think that if we are not loud about it and we don't ask for change, things are not gonna become different. And small things like, which bathroom should I use? What document or what name should you use, my preferred or my legal name? These tiny things add up and really change the experience of someone that is experiencing this kind of, journey.
Absolutely, every little thing makes a big difference. I can appreciate that, and I'm curious, growing up, if you had any experiences that made you want to get into giving back eventually. I feel like in so much of your work you're giving back to others, and I'm wondering where that started.
I mean, I'm, I feel like this is something that it's common or transversal to some stories from middle class families in Latin America. Both of my parents were founders in a way. My mom was always looking for a way to earn additional income, and my dad was always starting new businesses and creating value. So I had that education very close to home. And then growing up, I always wanted to be a media executive. That was my dream, working in Televisa. Televisa is the largest Hispanic speaking network in the world, and I wanted to be there. And then when I was in college, one day I walked by a door that said Entrepreneurs Association. And I was like, hey, what's this? And then I enter, and someone told me, yeah, you can own your business. And it's like, what? I can be a business owner? And that changed things for me. That was moment zero.
Wow, what a fun way to get turned on to entrepreneurship and the opportunities available to you there. And I believe you went to school at Instituto Tecnológico Autónomo de México. I don't know how well I said it, but is that right?
Yeah, your Spanish is good. Spot on. Yeah, ITAM. Yeah, yeah, yeah. That's a good school.
And how was it there?
That's a good school. I think. Well, if you ask me, it's the top school in Mexico. Some people are not gonna have that same opinion, but it's among one of the top five schools in Latin America, and it's basically something very geared towards economics, business, hard science such as mathematics, etc. Uh, and it's very demanding.
And that's where you found the entrepreneurship club?
Yeah, yeah, and actually, ITAM is not very well known for having founders. Like folks that go there, they wanna become executives or work at the government or become diplomats. That school has a long track record of appointing secretaries of state and presidents and stuff like that.
Interesting. And so you went into that school wanting to be in media until you started looking at entrepreneurship.
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, it's cool to see how that sort of run-in changed your desired career path. And so I believe you did get into the media space. What was your sort of first step after school?
So I went and started collaborating with the United Nations. You mentioned before when I started thinking about giving back, I think that I didn't expect to give back as a founder, but more in terms of creating like policy and doing like government work. So I got involved with the United Nations and I work as a volunteer. They do conferences that try to start conversations on very specific matters. And this conversation was about this event. This conference was about how can we create a world where there are less weapons and less weapons of mass destruction and so on. And it was funny because I started as a volunteer, and then they have like head of committees, and the folks that were there were very experienced senior media professionals, like TV executives and so on. And the person that was in charge of my committee quit in the middle of the process. But it was at that time where decisions needed to be made. And since I was very involved, they asked me, "Hey, do you want to be the new head of the committee?" And I say yes. But it was something that was above my head. And typically, we had meetings with folks at very senior levels of government. And there I was, a kid just trying, to learn the ropes and also guide an organization. But it was good. I met a lot of good friends, and that led me to start working and collaborating more closely now in a paid position with the United Nations, the Mexican government, and international governments.
And so you help those governments work together with the UN?
Yeah, I mostly work helping lead youth initiatives, and at that time, social media was something new. So, and since I was young, like young people can do new stuff. At least that's the perception. And I started working on something called the Global Interactive Forum. I also was an international delegate for like a youth ambassador thing for Mexico, representing Mexico. But mostly it was about how can we create change by using these new technologies and creating a space where organization, corporations, and NGOs can meet and discuss what it's relevant. And of course, everything is catered to the youths of the world. So in the end, it became a space where thousands of people just congregated and discussed what's going to be the future, and it was a very good and rewarding experience.
Yeah, no, it sounds like a really interesting place to work, and I'm sure you took a lot of learnings away for the rest of your career. How do you feel like your time at the UN changed your outlook?
I feel like it was funny because it just pointed me more strongly towards entrepreneurship, because I was always coming up with ideas, and some of those ideas were just shut down in the middle of the process, saying like, "Hey, we are not a for-profit company. Okay, if we want to do this, then we have to go to certain steps to make them a reality." But on one of those trips, I was like, I feel like from a very young age, I had to travel for work. And on one of those work related travel opportunities, a good friend that now is leading policy for Uber told me, hey, you should not work here. You should go and start your own business because this is not for you. And the second takeaway that I took by working there is that you have to have consensus and that every opinion matters. Sometimes people feel like just because they have a leadership position, they just can impose things. But if working with, parliaments of the world and youth folks taught me something, is that you have to have consensus. And you have to go there and just look and show them what you're trying to do and have an opinion that makes, if not everyone happy, it makes everyone to support what you're trying to do.
And so tell me about the business that you founded after that.
I mean, it was a serious, it was like multitude of things I tried to do next. I feel like great founders. I'm not saying I'm great yet, but founders typically do a bunch of things that don't work, and some of those work.
Yep,
Um,
I've been there.
right after, yeah, you just like what landed on my LinkedIn that I think that is mostly successful. I went on and I started working on digital products, and I started a company called Rocking Code. And when we started the company, it was more about experimentation and actually tapping into the networks that I previously built working with governments. So I called everyone that I knew, and that's how I landed my first customer, saying, like, "Hey, now I'm doing apps. I can, I can build that product for you." But then very quickly we shifted into one product company, and we were building open banking APIs. And we stumbled into that opportunity because when we started to have conversations with banking partners, everyone had a shared consensus. Banking cores are old. We need something that let third parties connect easier, but without going the risk of having a privacy leak or by exposing core confidential secrets to our trade. So that's why we came up with this new way to connecting them safely with third parties. A good example of a company that is doing the same is Plath here in the US. They let anyone connect to your bank account safely. In my case, since I was doing this in 2015 in Mexico, and you know, venture capital wasn't what it is today, we have to go through so many years of just hard work and you know just bootstrapping to make it possible. And in the end, we were able to have a small but good exit of that company, and that was created a bunch of opportunities just continue building value, moving to US, and just trying to reach like bigger and higher limits.
Well, that's incredible. Congratulations on that exit. And
Thank you.
um, absolutely. And, what took you sort of into that software development world initially?
I mean, I'm a I'm a technical founder, and I just like computers, and I fell in love with the iPhone. And when I started doing apps and software, there were no applications on the App Store that were Mexican. So I wanted to have one of the first Mexican applications. And one of the customers that we worked on very early on was like the National Consumer Protection Agency. And with my team, we did the first app that ever hit the App Store from the Mexican government. And then I just continued into that
That's
road.
incredible.
And yeah, thank you. It was very good. Um, and very exciting. Just having a product on the App Store, it's a phenomenal, achievement for any team. So we were just happy to have something on an iPad. Yeah, and then I just continue doing software. And if you ask me, I don't have to say it. Software has eaten and is eating the world. Now AI is doing it. So that's why I love software.
There's so many options available when you're creating software. You can really create anything that you can come up with, and it certainly gives you a lot of tools that you need to create.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, I'd love to dig in a little more into some of your work. So, first, let's talk about Minerva Robotics. Could you tell me more about that and how it started?
Oh yeah, absolutely. With Minerva, our goal is to create higher quality, affordable food. Uh, we started the company right in the middle of COVID, actually when COVID was starting, and it was driven by the need that a lot of foods, when they are produced at mass scale, uh, have very low nutritional value, and when they are created at low scale but high quality, it's a painful process for everyone involved. And It all started because on a trip to San Diego, I had the most amazing tortilla, and then the owner of that tortilla factory showed me the process, and it was difficult to stomach. It was full of like OSHA violations, and it was difficult. Margins were tight, and then uh, I realized that with robotics, we could automatize many of those processes and just make something more efficient. So for the past 2 years, we've been working on a new way to produce food. I have great partners. New Mexico State have been working with us to develop the technology. And now that AI is starting to take the world by surprise and showing the perspectives, we see the potential of creating food using robotics. I feel like maybe we are 5 to 7 years kind of early, but still, after COVID, something happened called the Great Resignation. So folks didn't want to work in, I want to say, low-paying jobs, and not because they didn't need the money, but just because if you're gonna work somewhere and you face the consequence of dying suddenly because there's a virus, you want to work into something more meaningful and in a better, like, conditions. So every business in America has been struggling to fire entry level workers, not only the food industry.
Yeah, so this it makes so much sense on so many levels to bring robotics and automation deeper into the food industry. There's so many inefficiencies in the space as it is, so I can only imagine where this could take you. Um, Really cool to see what you're working on there. And what do you envision for the future of the company?
I'm gonna share with you my utopia, but is to have local high quality food manufacturers, and with that sprawling a new generation of small producers that are enjoying what they do, and just having a humanity that has more options and more high quality options to have as food. That should be the goal, and the possibilities are big. We have had conversations with the largest bakery in the world, Bimbo. And the name is funny, especially when you say it in English. But they are an amazing company. Yeah, they have a bunch of bakeries all over the world. We have had a lot of interest from the DoD and the military. When you think about the prospects of having um, something better and that's also affordable, doors open. And also, I chose to work on robotics because I think that there are some fields that are more important than others. So one of those fields is how we eat, the other is how we spend money, and the other is how we get healthcare. And I already did a failed healthcare startup. It was a long time ago. We were doing Uber for doctors, and it failed because my co-founder was a doctor, and then my co-founder quit, and then I had to shut down the company. Even though we were doing great, we were, getting customers in New York, a very tough market, and just handling all the regulation related to healthcare in America. It's almost an impossible task. And the other thing is that I do believe in the power of decentralization and fintech. I'm a fintech founder, etc. But just in this case, I wanted to work on something that could be more meaningful. And I'm a Latina, and many Latino families heavily depend on food production and having small restaurants. So I wonder if we could make a change to lives of millions of people that identify with this kind of work and just like to bring comfort and love to meals and just make their businesses more profitable.
No, I like that you started with sort of the culture and the energy around food, and how it brings people together, and then also potential profit and efficiencies are part of that. But it's just the ecosystem of food is such a big part of our lives.
Oh yeah, it is. I feel like what you eat, how do you spend most of your day, and how do you sleep, how you sleep, are some of the biggest moments where you can make meaningful change and improve your life. And just because of the conditions of, you know, the soil, the resources that we have, if we don't change how we eat and make something better, then we're gonna be in a lot of trouble in a few years.
Yeah, absolutely, and certainly we have a lot of work to do. And you've mentioned a handful of startups and things that you founded. One I wanted to make sure to hit is Founder Familia. Could you tell us what that is and how you got that started?
Yeah, absolutely. Founder Familia has been one of my largest undertakings on the giving back and community space. I'm one of the individuals that co-founded Founder Familia. There are other amazing founders and investors that also co-founded it. And at this point, Founder Familia is the largest organization for Latino founders in the world. And we started with the idea to create a grassroots movement where one founder can make the difference to another founder. And now we have 370 founders on board. But these founders are special because most of them are venture backed or venture ready. That means that they are taking outside capital to grow their businesses, and this capital is venture funding. And that's truly special because, as an asset class, only less than 1% of all businesses in America can get venture funding. And from that 1%, only 2% goes to Latinos. So if you're a Latino, also if you're a woman, if you are an underrepresented community, a queer founder, a black founder, a veteran, etc., if you're in any of those intersections and you get venture funding, you are an statistical anomaly. It's so difficult to get it. I think it's potentially harder than winning the lottery.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate. It's something I've been reading about as well. The disparities in funding based on race, gender, and otherwise. And I really get optimistic when I see organizations that are focused on founders from underserved communities or underserved groups. And so seeing what you're doing with Founder Familia and sort of propping up these Latino businesses is just really important. And I thank you for that.
Oh yeah, no. I feel it's one of my missions, and what we do is we try to expand the surface area for founders to have success. I'm lucky enough to be here in San Francisco, and I do know the method of building Silicon Valley companies. And one of those things is that you have serendipity. When you live in San Francisco, then you stumble upon some folks that can make a difference in your journey very, very easily. So we've been trying to kind of code that for Latino founders and just bring it everywhere. So we do a bunch of online things, a bunch of offline things. We've been doing co-working sessions. This is a model that I actually initiated, and the thesis was super simple. Happy hours are dead. Post COVID, nobody goes to the office, so we should start co-working sessions where people show up. They co-work together for one day. You put 20 founders in a room, you bring some investors, and then you let magic happen. And today, like this new model and all the new models of engagement that we're creating have been so powerful. Um, there is there are several programs that are helping Latinos thrive in America. One of those is from AWS, and in their latest cohort, 7 out of the 11 companies that were selected are members of Founder Familia, and that is just a testament of, yeah, we are being able to pull the community together. And the point of interactions that we have with founders is very limited. One thing that I r- understood very recently is that founders are truly folks that are putting everything in their lives at risk. And I've been very vocal about this. If you know a founder, you have to speak about them, you have to champion them, and you have to go and buy their products because they are putting their life at risk like nobody else on the planet. If they fail, nobody's going to give them that time back. And that's especially hard when you think about a world where ageism exists, where there's this social stigma to not having success and where obligations are very real. Just the prospect of not being able to pay for healthcare for your family, it's something that happens, right? So we are very aware that founders don't have time, and we circle everything we do around that. So if you know, and I'm gonna use this as a public announcement, if there are any Latino founders that want to join an amazing community, go to founderfamilia.com, do and fill out the interest form, and we will get back to you. But we're actively in the hunt for founders, and I'm just gonna share this story. Founder Familia has been so powerful that it got me into the White House. I met the VP Kamala Harris, yeah, and her husband, uh, and it was because of Founder Familia. And the unfiltered stories like this. We have a board member. His name is Andres Izquieta. He's one of the most active folks on the Southern California ecosystem. He lives in LA. He's a serial founder. He has founded businesses that have been in the multi-million ballpark in revenue. And he was at a reception, and then he met one of the folks working with the team of the VP, and he shared the story of Founder Familia. And then that folk told him, "Hey, I think my boss is gonna be interested in meeting you." So long story short, 1 week later, we got a call. "Hey guys, can you be in the White House in 3 days or something?" So we got the invitation. We took 6 founders with us, founders that were mostly seed and Series A founders, female founders, founders that are working on healthcare, media, helping working in fintech, and then we invited them to the White House, and it was very powerful because they end up connecting with folks that will make a difference in their journeys. So just like that, we're trying to open bigger doors and let founders be the most trembling and amazing voice that they can be, and trying to make a difference in the journeys.
That's an incredible opportunity that you're able to provide to those founders, and what an honor to visit the White House and meet with the vice president. It's pretty incredible, and um,
I didn't
amazing
expect to
journey
do
that
that.
you've been on. I'm sure. Um, and you mentioned, founders that are interested should come to your website, fill out the application. Once someone does that, and let's say they get in, what is the experience like?
So we have a Slack. It's like a group chat where you're gonna have access to the best founders that are Latino in the world, and then we are doing mostly activities to increase your chances of getting funded. One thing that has been terrible about this bear market scenario and this world crisis is that fundraising now is very, very hard. But it's not only hard for early stage founders, it's very hard for later stage founders, so Series B and Series C and so on. So we do have founders that are Series B founders, and we're trying to help them as much as possible to fundraise effectively. So we will help you with that. And the other thing is that we will provide community support. We've been doing something led by Alex Ruiz. Alex Ruiz is an ex-Googler. He is Stanford educated. And while he was in Stanford and in Google, he started doing something that he calls the Stronger Together groups. So it's basically like a mastermind session. You have 6 founders that are going through something similar, and you meet with them weekly, and they become your accountability group. But what's very interesting, this also happens in Y Combinator and Techstars and other accelerators, right? And also we have a bunch of founders at YC, Techstars, L-Band, Stanford, MIT, Harvard, and so on and so forth. Um, but one thing that is special about the group is that when you knock down that cultural barrier and you have this shared understanding on something similar, right? Your mom act like that because, oh, she's a Mexican mom, and Mexican moms can be like tiger moms, like Asian moms. Oh, you eat that in Christmas. Yeah, I do it too, right? So it brings the level of dissonance to a minimum, and it lets founders just be their true selves. And that has been very, very powerful. We're still working on the data, but we have helped founders fundraise for a good and sizable amount. And the most important thing is that we, as Founder Familia, have been the only organization that has been able to pull together the ecosystem together. Because this happens to every ethnic group, but you sometimes have these crabs in a bucket mentality. And in our case, what we try to do is to expand the surface area through shared understanding and to avoid becoming or trying to compete and just knock down other like partners and associations. So we have one very good example about this is that we're partners with the Latino Business Action Network program in Stanford. And instead of trying to compete them with them, we partner up and we are trying to send founders both ways, right? Because if one Latino thrives, then they can pull another one and just make this chain of success happen.
It's great to see how you're leveraging partnerships with important organizations to push the organization forward, to help the founders that you're working with so closely. And um, I read that you partnered with Google for Startups. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah, I mean, we have founders that were recipients of the previous Google for Startups award. They get funding, they get resources, and we are one of the affinity organizations that recommend founders their way. And Google has been kind to being a fundamental partner in everything we're doing. But just like with Google, we are working with different organizations and just trying to become a good signal of curation. And I say this in a very positive way, but you do need curation, right? Because in a world where you have so much noise and you have so many opposing views, you need to have a body or organization that can help you filter through that noise and just get to the best founders that are out there. I've been working on my personal thesis about pattern matching. And I'm not saying that Founder Familia does pattern matching, but I think that just as investors pattern match the best opportunities, underrepresented founders have to pattern match their best investors and partners, right? You want to work with folks that look like you, that have been through similar experiences, because when the things get hot and heavy and things are about to break down, you want to have folks in your corner and just cut to everything that is just going to become noise or, painful.
And where do you envision Founder Familia going in the future?
So the biggest thing has been decentralizing it. As I mentioned, I'm one of the co-founders, but there's more folks involved. And we started as a incubated project within an investor association called VC Familia. So VC Familia started 1 year before Founder Familia, and VC Familia helped Latino venture investors to come together. And then they started to see the need to do something similar with founders. So they decided to create Founder Familia. And what happened very unexpectedly and luckily is that founders took over the organization. And then we are two organizations with a shared umbrella organization. And the mission for our new combined company or NGO is to close the funding gap for Latina founders and investors. So hopefully in 10 years, I can come back to this podcast and I can say that we increased by 1 or 2 points the amount of funding the Latinos get. And if that doesn't happen, at least I would like to share that we helped mint at least 1 billionaire. That would be the end goal. And in terms of organization things, decentralization, having more folks that can have local presence. So we've been decentralizing. We have a founder board. We are appointing ambassadors in LA, in New York, Austin, Miami, Chicago, El Paso, etc. And what we want is that they drive the organization and that they can translate the needs that founders have in every city. And it's funny because I don't know if you heard like this big explosion of founders that were going to Miami because Miami was the new San Francisco. Um, I can see why local presence is very important. And I can tell you that every city has its own distinctive flavor. And For one instance, if we launch an event in Miami, it can get sold out in a couple hours, even if it's launched on a Sunday morning, right? People are eager to create value. And if we do something in San Francisco, it's always going to get packed. But if we do something in LA, it's going to be hard because folks in LA don't like to drive too far from their homes, right? So yeah, New York. It's also, if you do something in New York, is gonna get very packed. But the mix of founders that you get in New York is like multi-industry and so on. So what we're doing is we're trying to have folks that are at the local level that understand better the perspective and the landscape, and just try to bring value. And one thing that our leadership and the combined leadership has been very keen to do so is to work with affinity organizations such as Black VC, All Rise, Diversity VC, Techstars, and so on and so forth. So we are just one more cog in the underrepresented ecosystem, but hopefully together we can make a difference, and in a few years have more folks that look like us. I feel like the pie is always bigger. You don't have to exclude anyone, but you just have to make more spaces for the other folks to join.
Yeah, exactly. There's plenty to go around. If you're enjoying this episode, I would greatly appreciate if you could review, like, comment, or subscribe on your favorite platforms. Your engaged support goes a long way in helping the show grow and getting our impactful guests heard. Now back to the show. And, certainly wishing you the best on that journey. It sounds like you've already helped quite a bit. And I'm sure the founders that you've worked with are feel very fortunate to have been involved.
Yeah, thank you. It's a privilege. It's a privilege. My life changed the minute I was invited to a barbecue at a mansion, a $20 million mansion in Los Gatos, California. And that was like the first day that someone put together the Latino community that eventually transformed into Familia. And now learning about amazing stories is just fuel to continue going, because you expect to be that everyone is going to have kind of a similar background, but it isn't, you know. And I think I've heard the best stories from Latino founders. Also, I feel like my life purpose now is more about helping underrepresented founders. I created a good, and I'm part of the team that created an amazing organization such as Founder Familia. But now with what I'm doing with Prism, if I can bring safety and help queer founders thrive, that's going to be amazing. So for one instance, I'm tapping into my Latina intersectionality, but in the other, tapping into my queer and trans identity. But I feel like that if folks are able to support and just be allies, change is going to happen.
Earlier, you mentioned some of your work with queer founders, and you mentioned your new company, PRISM. I'd love to learn a little bit more about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to talk about it. So basically, Prism, we are creating safe spaces for founders. The Maslow pyramid for queer founders is broken, and if you don't have sense of safety, then you don't have anything, right? And I experienced this firsthand since I started to transition. Even before, like my biggest fear when I had to transition was that I was gonna lose my professional ability to work in startups, and that people were not gonna be supportive. And then the opposite happened. And by sharing my story, I created support for me, and just move into in this environment where I can help others thrive. And for Prism, we're gonna be doing something that we are calling the queer working. It's gonna be a 4-day activity in San Francisco, California, and it's the safest place for founders all across America. So we're inviting founders that join us, and like that, we're gonna be creating different products and initiatives to increase safety for queer founders.
That's amazing to hear, and I can only imagine just providing that space is going to open up so much potential for startups that have been locked away and people that have been scared to put themselves out there or maybe have experienced hate. And this is an opportunity to unlock all of that. And Um, the idea of somebody that is, an incredible entrepreneur and a founder that's sort of been unable to be themselves out in that startup community, now having this safe place is, I think it's going to be pretty tremendous.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm happy. I'm gonna be speaking. Well, actually, this is the first time that I'm sharing Prism publicly. I've been building it behind the scenes for the past months or so. Um, but I think that since this is gonna be post produced and everything, um, I'm there's gonna be something else where I talk about this publicly next week. I'm gonna be doing a panel at LA Tech Week, and I'm joining folks from Black VC, AWS for startups, and Diversity VC. And I'm gonna be sharing with the world what I just shared with you. And my mission to do this and why I'm doing it is because I envision a world where queer folks don't have to come out publicly anymore. Okay, yeah, it's funny because when you don't experience the need to come out because you're cisgender, you never think about it. But coming out is just something absolutely barbaric, right? As I feel like is something that is geared more to the Stone Age, because nobody should care what you like, how you dress, how you look, etc. Right? But in reality, we live in a binary, and living in that binary requires us to come out and say who we are and how we identify as. And it's a very difficult process. If we go into the statistics, around 50% of trans folks uh, think about suicide or they go through suicide just because they have to, be out there and their loved ones, their communities are not going to support them. And then if you look into the unemployment, the poverty lines are very, very similar. And it's not only trans folks. You see the same thing for queer folks, for bisexual folks, for lesbians. I mean, it's something very, very tough. Also for gay folks, especially if they are like POCs. It's very, very hard. So in the future, hopefully, by the help of something like Prism, we're going to change that perspective. We are starting to work mainly with founders. We're trying to have more venture ready founders joining us. We're going to have like this online network where founders are going to be able to meet and talk and, share experiences. Uh, but in the future, we will potentially open up our services and our products to operators, investors, other type of queer folks that are in the ecosystem. And the reason that we are starting with founders, and this is going to be biased because I'm a founder, but I think that founders create the flywheel of transformation in society. So starting with founders makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's true. I mean, thinking about these founders that are starting, many of them transformational companies, they're going to be creating not only the culture of their business, but, just sort of the culture of their brand out in the world. So I think it makes a lot of sense to start there and expand.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm stoked about it just in terms that with this journey, I've been meeting amazing LGBTQIA founders everywhere in the world. And there's a need to have something that is brown led and female led. And I won't go into much detail, but like the political, dissonance that we are experiencing as a society now in America is just a hamper to innovation. So we hope to bring a new face to that. And Uh, I'm very intentional about highlighting the economic value that the underrepresented groups bring to society. In our case with Prism, we are still pre-launch, but the founders that are already on board as members represent at this moment about 100 million in combined valuation. So it's a handful of founders, right? I'm sure that that goal will go, north of the multi-million, even billion like size. And I think that when you think about capitalism and inclusion, if you're queer, it's very important to have rights. But if we are in a society that requires us to work, then we have to be able to work without any limitation and just provide to ourselves, to our families, to our communities. And this is something that is still, work in progress. But I'm thinking more about inclusion in terms of economic inclusion rather than the feeling of just dressing as you like. That's also very, very important. But I'd rather be paid my fair share, and I'd rather be earning whatever everyone else earns than focusing on what I'm gonna wear. Like, I feel like in terms of priorities, that should be number one. And at this moment, even if it sounds something that is, you know, it's a reality, it isn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's exciting for the future of our country and our world to think of those individuals, having their greater share of the wealth and be able to, spread acceptance.
Yeah, totally. Totally.
So I want to switch over to another topic. Earlier, when we were talking about Minerva Robotics, you mentioned sort of the surprise the world has gotten lately from artificial intelligence and the various technologies around it. I'm curious just around your thoughts on where AI is now and where it's going in the future. There's so many. There's doomsday scenarios on one side, the other side paints a beautiful picture, and there's a lot in between. So always curious to get an expert opinion on the area.
I mean, I'm not an expert. I do have some angel investments in companies that are doing amazing things with generative AI, with infrastructure, just challenging the models that existed before. And what I've been learning through those founders, and also through friends here in San Francisco, because San Francisco has been ground zero for this new era of AI. I think that AI is happening everywhere in the world, but you have so many amazing companies that are based here in the Bay Area that are doing AI that is just hard to argue that this isn't ground zero. But I think that if the software explosion was big, the AI explosion is going to be 10 times bigger, because now we are able to do a lot of tasks that consume time using robots. In this case, sorry, yeah, now we're able to use robots to do this task. In this case, software robots, but robotics nonetheless. Yeah, what I think is different now is that with these LLMs, large language models, what powers GPT, is that in terms of computational efficiency, every application out there can use very cheaply a backend as a service, a smart backend as a service platform. And by that, let me give you an example. Let's say that you have an app that lets you budget every time that you get money in your bank account. It creates a budget and lets you spend money efficiently, right? So you have to create the rules. And the rule may be, if user gets the money, then do this, right? So you have to code all that business logic and then figure out where you're gonna put that code, host it, monitor everything, right? What's happening now with these models is that instead of wasting time building that logic, you can outsource it to a third party now. And you can focus on the input, so the data, and you can focus on the output, the UX. So the amount of companies that we're gonna see that get created is just gonna be exponential. And in a way, it's like if you were doing startups, the engineering cost just went down heavily because now you can use the services. Of course, you have the other perspective, the perspective of folks that are doing the actual models, the infrastructure. That business is extremely costly. It's very difficult to vet, very difficult to do due diligence, very difficult to do due diligence just because you need actual science folks that understand the in and outs and the nitty gritty, and that are very, very technical. But the opportunity is similar. I know, like, no code platforms exploded a few years ago, so now with AI and generative AI, is like no code for everything. And just the amount of imagination that the world can outpour and is bringing will be fantastic. And I don't believe that on the doomsday scenario, I feel like now these models look more smart than they are actually are. They are able to, imitate a conversation, and they are just pretending to be smart, but they aren't.
And they're pulling from, existing data that's out there. They're not coming up with new things so much yet, right?
They are not coming up with new things. They cannot reason, and how they do it is that they use probability to estimate the next word, and they do their best guess to show you what you want to see, but they are not thinking about the answer. So I feel like folks started to get very wary and feel unease, because when you think about language, uh, language is a codification of something, right? So it's a codex. And these LLMs can also work with actual code, because that's also codified. So then they started doing code by themselves. And I think that when people saw that, they thought, oh my God, they can manipulate code. Now they are going to tap into the nuclear, warheads, and we're fried. But the reality is that they are still not at that stage. And I do think that every time that someone makes something cheaper for humanity, we move forward as a civilization. And this happened when electricity became available to everyone. This happened when the phones became our personal computers and went into our pockets. And now it's going to happen with intelligence. We are just outsourcing so many tasks, and we're going to be happier. I mean, I use ChatGPT every day. I use it to correct my grammar. I use it to write auto responses. I use it to write code. That's super helpful, you know? And it's just like 10xing whatever I was doing before.
Yeah. I've definitely met some other people that have been using it in ways to create a lot of efficiencies. And that's sort of the vision that I see longer term around AI, is just creating tremendous efficiencies in work and life, and allowing people to hopefully focus their time on things that they're really good at and enjoy doing versus, more laborious, busy work that they might be able to now get done by AI.
Yeah, I'm with you on that 100%. And you know what? Also, I don't know if you are big on sci-fi and on technological, progress, futurism, and whatnot. But as a civilization, if we are able to reach the singularity, and then we can have machines doing our work, I think that then we can focus on to more pressing tasks, right? And it wouldn't be about how we survive, because at this point it's just something that is uh, a shame scenario for developed nations. And in cities such as San Francisco, you see the poverty when there's so many folks with so much money, right? And then you think, how can we have a more balanced equation? And I think it comes down to having cheaper resources. And in the information age where we produce so many things in the computer, we should let everyone just take advantage on that opportunity and then focus on more relevant things, right? I feel like it's more important to talk about, food, and it's gonna sound funny, but gender, and how we enjoy ourselves and what we do to find entertainment, and how do we connect more deeply with folks. And you know what? This is important. Like, I felt very anxious for 2 weeks in March when the generative AI thing was at its peak. And I felt bad because I realized that doing startups was going to become way harder. And I felt threatened because about GPT and saying, like, hey, I'm going to become redundant. I can't do anything as a founder. But then it hit me. And that's why I started working so heavily on community, and why Prism become more aligned to me. In the future, if software gets written by AI, the things that cannot be automated are human connection and doing community-based products, and just letting folks interact and meet with each other on just like the things you do, right? Because you are sharing these amazing stories from folks that you are interviewing. but that cannot be replaced by AI, right? We will still need human connection. We need humans to thrive and survive.
That's a really good point, and I like what you're saying about sort of giving us more time to focus on those types of important things. And one thing that's come up on the show a handful of times is just we live in a society where we have the resources to take care of everyone, where people shouldn't have to worry on a day-to-day basis about survival. And in a world where we could actually make that happen, people will have the opportunity to focus on things they care about and things that they're good at, and all that's going to do is make our entire world better, by having people that are able to spend their times on their passions. They're going to be enriching others' lives, and not having to worry about resources. So I like to hope that we're on a path to that.
Yeah, and I like your framing. I feel like if we focus on the positives, then we are gonna see a more hopeful outlook. And with every new wave of technological innovation, there's always like this wave of doom and gloom. But we should look into the brighter side, right? And especially, I feel like in my particular case, if we if we embrace technology to the fullest, then we can think in a world past, you know, antagonistic activities, and to a more efficient, more civilized manner. And that's, coming up with unique technologies, our superpower as humans, and our unique ability. So we better embrace it.
And speaking of some of those technologies, I know that you're very passionate about Web3 and serve as a Web3 NFT and robotics advisor at the Arrowhead Center at New Mexico State University. Can you talk about more? Uh, can you talk more about your passion for Web3 and your work in that space?
Yeah, absolutely. I've been working as an advisor to Arrowhead and also to other communities by putting volunteer time. I typically do 4 to 5 hours of office hours to underrepresented founders all across the world, most of that time being allocated to founders in the US and in Mexico. And I talk with them about their business models, and we come up with ways to make what they're doing more efficient. Sometimes it's more about providing them with support. Uh, it's funny because when you're a founder, you feel like what you're experiencing is unique to you. But once you start sharing, you realize that there are more people that feel like you. But it's hard to share because let's say that you are someone in your 20s or mid 20s, and you want to share with your friend that it's a VP at a bank, saying, hey, I'm worried because I just landed a $1 million check, but I'm still worried about hiring. And we are having some wins, but I fought with my co-founder. People just don't understand where you're coming from, right? They are just gonna, they are not gonna be able to relate. And in the case of the work that I'm doing with Arrowhead, I've been focusing what I do more on the robotics and the Web3 perspectives. In both industries, I have played a hands-on role on how those industries are shaping and developing. And I'm a big believer in decentralization. Decentralization is an opportunity to bring more fairness into a capitalistic world. And now that we're able to code actual money into software, the possibilities can be endless, especially for developing countries such as Latin America countries, Mexico, Brazil, Argentina, and so on and so forth. Uh, the banking systems or industries have historically been very unstable, and Web3 and crypto changes that, right? Because it creates something that it's kind of self-governed. It's actual cheaper money, and it's transparent money. And I feel like for places in the world that lack transparency, the efficiency of the blockchain becomes very evident. There's nothing that you can hide to a blockchain. Everything is visible. So a couple of years ago, when the NFT fever was exploding, I went deep into collecting art and just going into the deeps and into how these technologies were actually working. and I'm still very passionate about it. I think that having the power of define the future of money is going to be very important. And now that we are living in a bear market, it seems like crypto died, but it didn't die. It's just builders are building, they are creating value, and financial institutions all around the world are working very hard to bring on those crypto rails to their products. Um, that's what I am very passionate about it.
That's good to hear that those things are ongoing. I've certainly always believed in the merits of decentralization and blockchain ever since I learned about them. And the craze that you mentioned, the Web3 craze, the craze around NFTs, wondered and was going to ask, how that, if that sort of deflated some of the innovation going on. But it sounds like it's still ongoing. The people that truly understand it believe in it and know where to go, and just all that's burst is this little bubble on the surface of pop culture.
Yeah, and I mean, like great innovations always start as toys, right? So the folks that are doing now Web3 and crypto, they are having fun. They like what they do. They are big believers, and it's also very efficient. I'm a big fan of Solana. Solana is one of the new generation blockchains. They are based here out of the US. They are mostly based in the Bay Area. And the first time that I did a Solana transaction, it was magical. Let's say that you want to send $10, and you don't want to pay for fees or wire fees or conversion fees or anything. You just do it in Solana, and it's gonna arrive in less than 1 minute, practically in seconds, and it's super cheap. It's like 0.0005 cents or something. So yeah, and you know what? I feel like obviously this happens to every industry, but when you are not deep in that industry, you don't understand some things. And for the money, the fintech, the banking, the financial industry, there's this term, the cost of money term. And when you make it cheaper, then you make the system more efficient for everything that's happening. Even with the traditional banking system, you're fighting for very small percentages to optimize one, to optimize two, 3%, etc. Well, this thing can bring like a tenfold savings in everything you do. But of course, it's very challenging because with every like wave of innovation, you also need to understand how you are going to regulate it as a society. And unfortunately, the US has the leading currency in the world. It's actually the reserve currency of the world. So having the US with the dollar, with the Fed, it's always very hard when you're trying to create something that has a potential to replace it. So it's been a mixed bag, and especially here in the US, innovation has been stifled because regulators haven't been proactive to set up clear rules. It's been kind of the wild, wild west. And many of the best crypto companies are set up abroad because they have clear rules. And thinking about everything that's been happening in the past year, a lot of the stop on the crypto space, the stop on innovation, or on the perceived innovation was due to the government. They started to pursue legal action against the banks that were banking crypto founders, and they closed it. Basically, they closed the on ramps and off ramps for actual businesses to use crypto. So that, and you have the FTX fiasco and everything that happened, the SVB, implosion in March, and everything became very, very difficult.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a shame when innovation is stifled, whether it's by overregulation or the issues or mistakes from one organization. But I think there's a bright future ahead for Web3, and excited to see how it evolves.
Yeah, yeah. And if I have to say something about Web3 and then about NFTs, is that if you like the art, you should buy it. It's all about the art for NFTs at this point. And you have the chance to go a little bit deeper and understand the industry from a technical point of view. You're gonna have fun. You're gonna enjoy it. And if you ask me, if in the future we're going to have crypto or not, I think we're going to have it. And there's a clear link that is not evident at this point, but that's a link between crypto and AI. With AI, and I'm not going to go into deep about this because I'm not an expert. I'm more of an expert in crypto than in web than in AI. But in AI, you're having generative things, right? You can have copies. You can have things that are not the real thing. Well, with crypto, you can ensure that something is unique, right? You have digital provenance, you have a digital footprint, and that's what NFTs are, right? Our NFTs are well-defined property that is digital. So it's not evident right now, but in the future, if you want to have a future where AI triumphs, then you also have to ensure a way to protect property, and the way to do it is with crypto. That's already solved.
That makes sense, and uh, look forward to seeing that develop. And now let's zoom out a little bit more. You've done incredible work with so many individuals and companies over the years. Is there any particular story of when you really saw how much your work could directly affect change?
Uh, I've been getting more and more stories and messages from founders saying, "Hey, thank you, Renee. This helped me a lot." Sometimes it's for very minor things like having them attend a pitch review session, and sometimes it's a major thing like helping them broker an intro to an investor they want in their cap table. And by broker, I don't mean that there's any trade off or financial benefit on my end, but just the art of making great intros is the art of curating relationships. So letting folks that should meet connect. And I've been getting a lot of those lately. And for me, that's very powerful. And when you start adding those up, then you start to see a trend, and then your work becomes meaningful.
Exciting, and um, it must be nice to see the change that you're affecting, and um, really impactful work. And I'm curious if throughout your career, if there's been uh, any mentor that's been particularly impactful that you want to mention.
Yeah, and I've been thinking about this a lot in the past weeks. I think that my biggest mentor has to be someone that opened a lot of doors for me. Her name is Jessica Rojas, and she's the one that opened the door for me when we started working with the UN. Jessica has an amazing quality. She lets folks that are very young shine, and she doesn't feel fear. She she's just supporting folks to make a difference. She's not working at the Mexican Voting Institute. Mexican Voters Institute. And basically, what she does is she oversees the fairness of elections. And even if we, intersected for for a very short period of time, I often think that if it wasn't for her, my life would be very, very different. And I feel like that kind of, luck, that serendipity, it's something that is a privilege. And I try to be that for folks also in my journey. You never know who are you gonna bring that's gonna be a difference. It's funny because there are some founders that have already moved here to SF because I have, talked very positively about the light of the city. And one of those founders, he moved during the worst time for SF, and almost all their friends told this founder like, no, you shouldn't do it. San Francisco is dead, you should go to Miami, etc. And then I read a few days ago that this founder won a hackathon from one of the most respected venture firms. And he attended that hackathon because he now lives in SF, and he started to mingling with the AI folks. And I know that I was in part responsible for that founder story coming to SF, but now that he won the hackathon and that now he's very visible, I'm sure his life is gonna change, right? And it was a very, very tiny thing saying like, hey, you should come here. There's a lot of builders here. You're gonna have fun. You're not gonna get mentally bored. Give it a shot.
It's great to be able to provide those opportunities and help lead people on the path. Um, and there's one question that I make sure to ask every guest, and I'm curious to hear your answer. If you could snap your fingers and fix one thing in the world, what would it be, and how do you think that change would reverberate?
I feel like that's a very hard question, but I think that I would fix housing and give housing for free to every individual. I feel like housing for generations that are younger, you think of millennials, Gen Z generation, Alpha generation, don't having access to housing or to affordable housing, it's a true limitant in a career. So if you have a house and you don't have to worry about whether you're going to be able to pay rent and create a space where you feel comfortable, things can change. And there's a lot of real estate in the world. I don't know why there there's not enough housing, and these housing markets in the Bay Area, New York, in Mexico City is like housing market. That's almost impossible. You have to, you know, honestly win a lottery to buy a property. It's super expensive.
Yeah, there really is not enough accessible housing, and we touched earlier on just trying to remove some of that need to focus on survival for our society, and obviously, housing would be a huge step in the right direction. So, I know there's a lot of great organizations and companies that are working on affordable housing opportunities, and hopefully, we'll see that flourish.
Yeah, hopefully we need it.
I mean, I've really, really enjoyed learning about your work and your businesses. And, I'm sure plenty of people listening are loving what you're doing. How can people support you and your impact?
Um, well, that's an easy one. They can write. They can write an email. They can follow me on Twitter and just help me bring more change to underrepresented founders. If they can invest money on those founders, they should do it. And if not, they can buy their products or speak about the companies. I can share with you my socials and my email address, so I can hear from folks. I can hear from
Yeah, I'll make
folks.
sure to include those in the notes.
Yeah, yeah. But I feel like the biggest thing and how you can truly make change that is aligned to what I'm doing is help someone that is underrepresented. It does make a difference, right? And once you have privilege, it's very easy to not understand how other folks are struggling. But being underrepresented in America today is something that it's almost impossible to escape. So you can make the difference to someone's journey, you should do it. And go invest, go buy them, and talk about them, share what they're doing.
I love that message of support, and I thank you for all the work that you've been doing and the courage that it's really taken to go on this path that you've been on. Going from growing up in Mexico City and all the way through to where you are now, and in the Bay Area, and all of the steps that have gone on in between. I know that it hasn't been easy, but you continue to work hard and help the lives of others. Thank you so much for joining me, and look forward to sharing your story with the community and continuing our discussion in the future.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, and thank you so much for letting me share my story. What you do is amazing, and I'm looking forward to do, version two when I can come back and say like, hey, yeah, we helped mint some underrepresented billionaires now.
I can't wait for that. I'm really looking forward to it. Thank you. Thanks for listening to this episode of People Are the Answer. If you enjoyed the episode, share it with friends, and reviews or subscriptions on your favorite platforms go a long way to help the show grow. I want to share these incredible people and their remarkable work with as many others as possible. Thanks for your support. For more, go to peoplearetheanswer.com.